welcome to your next episode of Leaders in Conversation. How is leadership really doing? A real-time snapshot of leadership experience. My name is Jocelyn Stevens, and I'm an associate of Boundless Leadership and your host this evening. Hello, Rory. Welcome. So before I introduce tonight's guest and tell you a little bit more about tonight's topic, I would just like to say a few words about Boundless Wisdom and Boundless Leadership and what it is we do here. So Boundless Wisdom was founded in 2020 to partner with individuals on a journey to infuse hope and inspire action as they access wisdom. And subsequently, Boundless Leadership was founded last year in 2022 to work with leaders within the organizational context to scale purposeful leadership for today and tomorrow. And our work with individual leaders led us to the realization that leaders not only influence, have impact, and create sustainable value at an individual level, but at a collective and organizational level too. Hence why we moved into the kind of organizational space. Tonight, I have the incredible privilege of interviewing our very own Boundless Wisdom COO, Jeanette Head, and our Boundless Leadership Director, Crispin. Good evening to you both. I, in particular, am very excited to be having a conversation with you both as leaders tonight. So you're kind of on the other side of the camp, I suppose. Please introduce yourselves. Let us know a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do at Boundless. Jeanette, should we start with you?
Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you, Josh. Jeanette Head. I'm CEO of Boundless Wisdom. I've been in the learning and development HR people space for the last sort of 30 odd years, and then the last 6 years, really focusing most of my attention on crafting bespoke leadership development, leadership experiences, and facilitating immersive leadership experiences, and coupling that with coaching practices. I'm from Somerset West, and I'm really not going to go into all of the professional credentials. You're most welcome to have a look on LinkedIn and have a look on our website if you'd like to just find out a little bit more details. Thank you.
Crispin.
It's me, yeah. Josh, well done. You got the SWAT part right. I live out in Belleville, and sometimes SWAT becomes something else. I'm just reflecting. Jeanette and I worked with a group of leaders today, and I'm just reflecting on where my heart lies, Charles, and it is with that, with leaders, and I've been fortunate to work across, private sector, public sector, schools, non-profits, family businesses, and with incredible leaders just across the continent as well. And there's one thing I'm convinced about, and that is that if we're wanting to have an impact in our organizations and society and in our country at the moment, it's going to have to be through leaders. And that's why tonight's topic is also really so important for me, because we're seeing in our research, and we'll come back to that just now, is just showing us that there's maybe a different picture out there than the one that we're hoping for.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, as always, Crispin and Jeanette. So then I guess that sort of leads us quite nicely into the purpose of today's session, which is really about leaders. So tonight's episode, we will be sharing insights into the leadership trends as presented in our leadership experience survey that we recently asked, I suppose, yourselves as participants to participate in. The survey comprised of four separate parts, which we will discuss in a little bit more detail tonight. Firstly, it asked a little bit about you as the participants, and your industry and area of focus. So we will go into that just briefly. We also looked into the kinds of leadership programs and the initiatives that you have in your organizations. Before we asked your opinion and I suppose suggestions around current experiences of leadership. And then lastly, we did ask a little bit about what your sort of requirements of leaders are going forward, which was particularly interesting. So I'm looking forward to going deeper into that. But before we go into the actual research results, Crispin, can you take us through a little bit around the background behind why we decided to do this research?
Yeah, thanks, Joz. Just working in the leadership space, I've always wondered whether we're getting it right completely. And it's something that's been brewing since last year. And we thought of theming our Leader in Conversation episodes this year around the theme of reinventing leadership. And Gary, unfortunately, is not on the call, but Gary Graham from the Center for Reinvention was catalyst in helping me and us, just shape what that could look like and engage and ask that question. Are we on the right track? Are we getting traction? Is the kind of leaders that we are expecting, are we seeing that in real life? And is our investment in developing and growing leaders giving us the value and return that we want? And coupled with that, I mean, I've just, when one starts asking these questions, it's like radar. You see things and you pick up on things. And I just want to refer to three reports that I found incredibly intriguing. The one was, and I'm not going to go through all of them, we just don't have the time, was the PwC's Global CEO survey that they did earlier this year, where they interviewed global, CEOs across the globe. The second one was a piece of research that PwC's also done. It's called the Hopes and Fears survey that included something like 55,000 staff across all the continents, including Africa. And the third one that I picked up on, which I found really profound, was the Institute of Risk Management of South Africa that came out with the South African Risk Report for 2023-24. And as I said, I'm not going to go into all of them, but if you extract the key themes that are coming from that, the message is quite clear. In the CEO survey, it's talking about leaders are saying, we need to create a new leadership ecosystem. We don't know what it is yet, but we're realizing that our current ecosystem is not working. Leaders were saying, we're so busy playing catch up and we're running out of time that we're not investing enough time and energy in reinventing our organizations and reinventing our leadership and how we lead our organization. In fact, something like 40% of CEOs in that survey were saying that they're not sure if their organizations will be sustainable and viable 10 years from now. So that, so there's this growing, in Afrikaans we call onrustigheid. It's this kind of growing restlessness I'm picking up from the CEO survey, and from the Hopes and Fears survey that was done with staff, was also raising this question around what staff are actually expecting from their leaders, and what's seen as a kind of a disconnect between their lived experience and what is actually happening on the ground. And the one that I found incredibly, as I said, fascinating was the risk report. And oh man, that just really got me thinking, because it highlighted 10 critical risks for South Africa that we're facing at the moment, and pulled together and called a kind of a poly-crisis. And then from that, 4 scenarios. And then from that, Joz, which is, and I think we should share this with everybody, was what are the identified 10 levers that would start shifting the dial in terms of addressing the risks that we face as a nation. And guess which one was right at the top? Leadership.
That's, I guess.
Leadership.
Yeah.
So there were 10 levers, in terms of climate change, economic reality, stability, government policy, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
At the top, leadership. and the call for accountable, transparent, competent leadership is paramount when you start looking at what's required. And that's my introduction around how do we turn this country around and how do we turn our organizations around. And a last thought is what came through from that document or that piece of research was this beautiful quote that I've now taken on board is we need to build the leaders who will build the organizations who will build Africa. And that's an acknowledgement that's where it starts. And so we went full circle and said, okay, but are we getting this right? You know, is it working? And so what we thought of doing is, okay, well, let's test our community. Let's hear what our community is telling us. Hence the survey, which we've now sent out to our community. And what we're seeing coming back from that, and Jeanette will talk about that a little more, is a confirmation of the answer that's starting to unfold around where are we in terms of our leadership and the need to rethink and reinvent what we traditionally are doing. So it was important for us to, yes, all the research, the McKinseys and all of that, and the PwCs are out there, but what's the community saying on the ground? What are people really experiencing at the moment? And as I said, that led to the pulse survey that we did.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Crispin. Sorry, I do apologize if it is a bit glitchy on my side. The internet doesn't seem to be playing nicely with me today.
Just to, we're not able to necessarily see what's in the chat box. If something does come up there and there's a question, you throw it our way, please.
Yes, we actually just got a lovely comment from Rory saying that he got such positive responses survey, so that's great to hear. Thanks, Rory. I will let you know if there is anything coming up, so please do, everybody in the meeting today, please do pop your questions in if you have any as we go along, or if you need us to repeat something, just let us know. So yes, thank you, Crispin, for setting the scene for us. And it's clear that there is I suppose a need to understand our leadership landscape a little bit more, and especially off the back of those very interesting and very real kind of stats that you were bringing up in that risk report. And isn't it amazing that we are in the position to make an impact in leaders' lives that can have such a big and vast I suppose impact in our country and, you know, I suppose in our continent. So it's amazing that we are in that position. So yeah, thank you for setting the scene. Shall we dive into the actual data then? Sticking with you, Crispin, can you just describe a little bit about the kinds of participants that we had in the actual survey?
Yeah, thanks, Giles. You know, it was such an, for myself at least, an enriching experience. I think it's something we would like to do more regularly and cast the net wider. But what was great about the folk that completed or responded to our ask for and firstly, thank you to everybody who was actually did that. We really appreciate that. It was a good balance of private and public sector. So it's giving us a view, and it's interesting that across both private and public sector, we're seeing similar themes and trends coming through. We had representatives from the non-profit, non-NPO sector completing the questionnaire. And we even had practitioners in the field, folks who actually play in the space, consultants and leadership development practitioners sharing their views. We could recognize some of them, although it was anonymous, but it was incredible to get that feedback. So it was a great spread. And then in terms of position in the organization, because that was one of the questions, the majority of folk who responded were at a senior and executive level in the organization. So it's giving that lens. I think it's a credible view, and it's that. I think next time around, what one would like to, as I said, broaden it and get a perspective from people, like a PwC one that looked at CEOs and staff and start bringing that together. And then in terms of years of experience, we had folk that had 1 year to 3 years experience giving us their thoughts, as well as seasoned leaders giving us their thoughts. And again, it was encouraging to see that there is a consistency in the messaging that's coming through. So it's quite a broad range of people who contributed to what we have, but would love to do that in a broadest grouping at least. Yeah. And so sorry, while I'm at that, and as we think about what we're talking about tonight and who would it be relevant to, if you're an HR lead or a talent lead, and you own the budget for leadership development and it's part of your mandate, I think what we're seeing and hearing coming through may be very important for you and could enable conversations with your executive team about that. If you're a participant in your organization that's undergoing or participating in a leadership development program at the moment, some of what we will be sharing may resonate with you. And equally, if you're a sponsor of somebody who's embarking on a leadership development program, you may have one of your team members that's doing the program, and just hearing what's coming through from this piece of survey could help you have those kind of conversations that will help you embed the learning that your protege would be bringing back into the workplace. So I think there's people, interested in conversation about those in their various organizations and spaces.
Absolutely, yes. And I think even if you kind of take it from a forward-looking perspective as well, if you are going to embark, or that there will be a leadership program in your organization in the near future, you can also use this information as a comparison of what you should be looking for in that program.
Yeah.
So yeah, it sounds like it was a good mix, and I agree. I think it would be really interesting to do the survey again and broader perspective. And like you said, although we had some people who have been in the organization not too long, it would be really interesting to see people of various levels and their experiences of the leadership, and to compare it to what the actual leaders are saying. And to see if there is alignment between the two kind of references. So yeah, thank you. Shall we move into the more meaty part of the research? Part of the research, we asked the participants to give an indication of the kinds of leadership programs that they have in their organizations, and I suppose those who are consultants or people in the field, what are the kinds of initiatives that they are implementing in various organizations. And we also just asked them to give us an indication of the effectiveness of those programs. So Jeanette, can you tell us a little bit more about the sort of prevalence of those initiatives and the effectiveness of them?
Okay, right. It was very interesting. If we take the bucket around the leadership programs and initiatives being offered, at least above 70% of the participants said that their organizations are offering leadership programs. So it was encouraging to see that organizations are attempting to bring something into place for leadership. So that was a positive response. However, two components to that. The one is when we talk about what was your experience of the leadership program, more than 60% responded mediocre to poor in terms of how they're experiencing the actual programs being offered. And then I want to mention up front that more than 70% responded that they felt that the programs had little impact and value. So many programs happening, but the impact and the value and the actual experience of the program. So now we go into looking at some of the elements that might make up, and some of the questions that we asked. around that. So the one element was around accessibility. In other words, the question we asked was around, are the leadership programs being offered at all levels? And that came down at a lower percentage ranking, which means that the question we would ask then is or are the leadership programs being reserved for executive or senior level, or are you trying to groom, junior people into leadership? But that, the question around having a common narrative, developing common themes across vertically and horizontally within the organization, is that the question would be, if the leadership programs are not accessible at all levels, then that could possibly lead to why there might be a question around the impact or the value that those programs actually have in terms of shifting the organization. The second area that I could mention is around, if we talk about learning methodology, there seems to still be a very high indication that the leadership development programs are interventions or events, a program with a syllabus which might or looks to be still very either sort of classroom or in-person sort of based, and not necessarily following your 70-20-10 type principles in terms of application, but that there could still be many learning programs, but many traditional learning programs based on traditional methodologies as such. The other area that one could also refer to is the content. There was a question that we asked around the relevance of the content in terms of the current challenges that leaders are actually facing. Around that, there were less than sort of 40-odd% of the participants that felt that the content of the leadership development programs actually focus on the real challenges and issues that leaders are facing. So that leads to the question of, once again, going back to the learning methodology, are the learning programs traditional in the style of offering, but secondly, are we going to standard competencies or a standard syllabus, having generic topics being offered, and are they actually speaking to? And the response was, we don't necessarily feel that the content of the leadership programs are actually speaking to the real challenges that leaders are facing right now. So that's just a snapshot of the feedback that we got around the current practice around the leadership programs that are offered.
There is this indication from the research that perhaps the programs aren't actually as effective as they should be, and it begs the question then, is it because the programs are old school? I think you used the word generic. They're not being tailored to, like you said, the actual needs. And will actually, the research does bring back some useful information that indicates that. So we then asked the participants about their actual leadership experience, and this included, again, around the effectiveness of current leaders as opposed to the programs, how leadership has possibly changed in the past 3 years, if at all, and whether leaders are actually creating value and having the desired impact. So Crispin, we often ask whether leaders are walking the talk. What were some of the insights around that in particular? Does the research tell us that leaders, how are they showing up in organizations?
Just before I answer the question, I go back to something that Jeanette said.
Yes, yeah.
And share two real examples with you, please. Currently working with the national client that has a senior team in each of the 9 provinces. So you just picture this, the national, and then the 9 regional leadership teams with a common leadership competency framework and a leadership development program that's standard across the whole organization. And then a leadership program that's supported with executive coaching, coaching to support learners through or leaders through their journey. You know what the fascinating thing about that experience was? That leaders is the real actual issues that leaders were grappling with were outside of the competency framework. Yeah. They were very different. And not only that, is the actual challenges that a leadership group in the Northern Cape has is very different to a KZN or Gauteng. So can you see when we go too generic and we have a model and a framework that says one size fits all, we do that, but we're not getting the results. And what was interesting in the real learning wasn't what was happening in the curriculum, it was happening in the coaching conversations, because that was specific to where that leader finds him or herself and their reality and their challenges within the context that they find themselves. So that was an incredible learning. Is how do we, to your question, is how do we create an experience of leaders and how we develop leaders and their experience of their development and growth that is as specific as it can be and as broad as it, it's balancing that.
Yeah.
The second example, which I want to share with you, is we were both blessed to be part of an organization that we worked with over the last 2 years that actually did this. So they had a leadership program that was like from the CEO, exec team, middle management or senior management, middle, junior, all the way down to supervisory level, with a narrative that
you don't often see.
Exactly, and a narrative that spoke across all those levels. That an executive director can walk into a depot and have a conversation with a depot manager that talks about EQ, resilience, reinvention, disruption, because they started speaking the language this way through the organization. And something in these two examples says that there's lovely stuff happening out there. And maybe there's something we can learn from these examples. So back to your question, is what are people really experiencing? I think the sense is that the input and the output isn't working. In other words, what we're investing in leadership development from a time, a cost, and all of that, and even an emotional investment very often is not necessarily returning that investment. So that's the one thing that started coming through. And some other interesting themes around that question was how leaders seem to be more comfortable working on their own and in silos than in a collective space. And even if I think about a lot of the leadership work, we emphasize self-awareness, growth, your own journey. And I don't think we're doing enough, and I think that's what the message is coming out. We're not doing enough to build a collective leadership team, and as a collective deal with whatever the organization or the system is challenged with. We talk, sorry, I'm just using this as a paraphrase. We talk purpose, we talk vision, we talk these things in meetings and at boardrooms, but the feedback we're seeing in our survey is we're not seeing that on the ground. We're not seeing leaders live those or behave those behaviors. Sorry, that's bad English, but live that we talk about in terms of purpose and vision and that. And that disconnect between what we're hearing our leaders say and what we actually are experiencing. And what's interesting is I think as our world becomes more disruptive and uncertain, that gap I think is going to be doing this. And what came out of the PwC survey was leadership is a contact sport. We got to double down on purpose and vision and get that connect back with our people. And our little pulse survey showed us that gap is still very much there. And then the last thought is really that there's a heart and cry for good leadership. But also came out of the hopes and fears surveys that staff are saying, we want to choose to follow leaders who we can trust, who are accountable, who are transparent, that we can believe in, and then we'll give it our all. So that was just some interesting things. And I mean, there's a lot behind what I'm saying now. But again, just to sum it up, it's we do a lot, we talk a lot, but we're not necessarily seeing the culture shift, and we're not necessarily seeing the behavior shift that is required as we navigate into a very complex, disruptive future space. And hence then, okay, that's the reality. If that's what people are experiencing on the ground of their leaders, how do we change that? How do we rethink that? I'm sorry, I'm going off script again. We just worked with the leadership team this afternoon, Jeanette and I, and wrapped up their leadership journey. We had seasoned leaders, Jocelyn, tearing up and saying, I've learned not how to apply model or how to do this or that. I've learned what it means to be an authentic, congruent, purposeful leader. And that's what I want to be. And that I'm hearing is what staff are saying. That's what we want. That's what we want. Purposeful, grounded, accountable leaders.
Real human leaders.
Exactly.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Crispin. I think one thing just to kind of draw from your comment around collective leadership, it's interesting that that's coming out, that it's not there, it's not present, because there's so much power in that united front, and it can create waves, and so I think it is something that we should be questioning, and I'm glad that it came up. I do just want to sort of take us back. There was a comment, a very good comment from Michelle in the chat box around, just in response to the question you answered, Jeanette, and she just mentioned the fact that it also comes down to the quality of facilitators, the people that are actually facilitating those programs. In particular, she mentioned that it's people that don't necessarily have the sort of background or the stories in terms of the experiences that are required when facilitating, to kind of give that storytelling element that kind of yields so much, like what you've just done for us, Crispin, in giving us real stories of real leaders. And I do agree, it comes down to a level of experience in the facilitator that can really empower that journey in a program. It's only the start of a leadership journey.
Want to respond? Because
I do want to respond.
Michelle, you've got
you both.
Well, we won't go script now. Just a response to that one, Jocelyn. I think it's a critical point that's been mentioned, and Crispin and I experienced with the time. I think essentially what the feedback is telling us as well is, gone are the days when you have a PowerPoint deck of slides and you have the standardized content and you have a facilitator that facilitates content. What you need, and it's not an age-related thing, you need a seasoned process facilitator, not content, where leaders are at, and who can understand in the moment, in that immersive experience, what those leaders are going through in the system, and the context that they're operating within, and throw the script out, the standardized generic script out, and actually turn an experiential piece. Because leaders don't have time. If they're in a session, they can't go through a slide deck presentation. But we need to get back to the research and have a look at what the people say they want, and what everyone said they want. But certainly, Michelle, you opened up a point there for us that we could debate a lot about as to what future absolute experiential, immersive learning experiences would look like for leaders, that they could translate what we say we're going to do into the actual behaviors, which then shifts the culture of the organization, because that's ultimately what you want learning programs to do. Otherwise, there's no point doing learning leadership development programs if they don't make a fundamental return on leadership experience to the organization, to the people who experience the leaders. Then there's no, then it's a tick box. It's not really a development process.
Yeah, exactly. Crispin.
I know you want to keep us on track and on script.
No, go ahead.
We worked with, Jeanette and I worked with the CEO and his team a little while back, and it was a module. It was part of their program, doing module 2 today, kind of thing. And after tea, they came back and said, great, this is all cool, but it's not what we need right now.
Yeah.
Let's pause, and can we use the remaining of the session for us as a leadership team to engage with each other on this particular issue?
Yeah.
That was more profound and more valuable, their growth as a team, and it shifted more in that team than had we stuck to the script.
The script.
And I think there's a lesson to learn in how we design, for the HR folk on the call. How do we design these interventions and these programs? Because the feedback from our survey is saying we've got to do it differently.
Yeah. And actually, that's exactly, we have a comment in the chat box that's speaking to that. And it's around, using that as to enable more relevant programs, that are speaking to the current issues.
Yeah.
Sorry, we have another comment coming in. Will the outcome of the survey be shared broadly? Yes, it will be, and we will. I'll talk to that a little bit later. But I see Megan's giving some updates. So let's move into the next question, which is around the actual critical competencies, the skills and the attributes that leaders need to be demonstrating for today's leadership, and we keep speaking about relevance to people and the issues that we're currently facing. So Jeanette, can you take us through some of the insights that we got from the research there?
Right, yes. So very important is that this is not textbook and what everyone else says. This is the response to the question around what do you expect leaders to actually, how do you expect leaders to show up? What would you like to see them doing? And we sort of made it broad to, give us skills, competencies, whatever, behaviors, whatever we allowed for that. And when we took everything together and we summarized it, it was very, very interesting that there's sort of like 5 or 6 specific elements that come up. The one was, we want our leaders to be self-aware. We want them to know how they show up and the impact that how they show up has on us, on everyone else around. So that was an important one. We then can sort of bucket the next lot together in terms of sort of, we want our leaders to demonstrate humanity, to be humane in the way that and with that comes humility, it comes trust, the empathy, the compassion, but just to be humane in the way that we go about doing things. That was the second one. And then the third one, very importantly, is a number and a cluster of skills obviously associated with how leaders are able to cope with or navigate change and disruption that is happening around them. And coupled to that is, I'm just putting it under the label of sort of adaptability, because if you look at the adaptability intelligence or quotient, you're looking at things like thinking, mindset, perspective as being a critical anchor point of that. And what people are saying, participants have been saying, is we want to see within our leaders their ability to be able to adapt, to be able to be agile, to be able to think differently, open up their mindset and develop a different perspective around how they see things. And I'm sure we can start seeing the correlation. When we think differently, better, with a different mindset, we start building some kind of wisdom, and it actually helps us to do and to see the world so differently and to see our organizations from a different perspective, which really opens up really opportunities. So that came up as a very, very strong component. Words that were used to say, this is what we want to see our leaders doing. The emotional intelligence comes up as a huge component, and with that is emotional intelligence, agility, and resilience in the way that leaders are showing up, managing themselves, and then the way in which they connect with other people. So that came up as a huge component. And then the last one that we want to, yes, using the terminology big picture, we want to see them operate at a strategic level, and we want them to be able to connect the dots. So they need to be able to relate and interrelate, and see the connections within teams, across the business, within our communities, within our continents, globally. We want to see a leader who's able to connect the dots and see the big picture, and then help us translate and understand the big picture. And then through adaptability, we learn how to actually navigate our futures, and do that in a humane way, create space for connectedness and relationship, while still achieving results at the end of the day. So it was a very insightful and a well, you know, if we put all of this useful design, that word cloud for us, so if we could see what came up. But it's fascinating to see that out of this group of participants, how well articulated those expectations were. And it's not about how many degrees leaders have anymore. It's not about the technical expertise and competence. It's absolutely about the environment that is created within which you know, individuals, teams, and organizations can function effectively together. So those, great contributions in terms of what it is. And if you look at that, you can see that it relates to who the leader is and how the leader shows up, rather than the technical things that the leader does, which really alludes to management, not leadership anyway. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's those behaviors again. Fascinating. And I think, you know, once again, it's that whole thing around the soft skills, which I prefer to actually call the real skills, because those are what people are really looking for, and looking for in their leaders to demonstrate. And I think just bringing in Michelle's earlier comment, which was actually to the previous question, but it's still relevant to this, around empathy being what distinguishes. And I think empathy, and you know, it's part of EQ in general, is, you know, what distinguishes us from AI, and you know, everything that comes with all of AI. So it's a very true comment, and it's clearly being reflected in the research as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jeanette. Very, very fascinating. And actually, I think the next section around some of the sort of suggestions to enhance current leadership programs was where I found a lot of really interesting and useful information. Before perhaps you go into telling us a little bit more about that and the specifics around that, Jeanette, I just want to call out a few quotes that we got from the participants that I think really highlighted and actually bring out some of what we've already discussed tonight. So firstly, there was one comment where someone was suggesting that we actually ditch the traditional, so quote unquote, ditch the traditional business school offerings in favor for beyond just-in-time flavors and more pragmatic, real application, which we've heard tonight already, and we saw it so many times come through the research around that real time application of practical elements within leadership programs. And I think that also speaks to the behavioral element. Do you want to just talk to that briefly, Jeanette?
Yeah, so I want to give you an example just in terms of how and I are running a program at the moment, just to see how that comes to fruition. So the difference between having a standardized curriculum and presenting that content versus, and I think this is what participants are saying, we're looking for having more pragmatic, real-time, you know, what's real for us in the moment that we're in. We are on a leadership development program. So yes, you would have theming, but for every single time we meet in prep for the next session, it's not how do we go through the deck for the content we need to do. It's what was the immersive experience, what happened to that particular group, and we'll find we'll do one intervention with one group of leaders and it will work beautifully, and we'll do that same group with another intervention and it will flop horrifically, and then change in the moment the process. And this is what participants are really saying: make it real time and relevant to leaders, and not have the standardized content that we go through, and whether people are learning or not learning or whatever. I mean, essentially what you're saying is it's a tall ask for a process facilitator, but the tall ask is, you know, it's not if I catch 2 out of the 12 people who are engaged, then I've done something. It's I need to engage all 12 people, and I need to create a context and an environment that will enable that to happen. So that would be the one component, Josh, is absolutely making sure that the methodology, the way in which one is putting together the leadership development programs, is that it is hyper customized, tailored. And now we're not saying tailored beforehand and then we print all the manuals and everything's done. It's a broad journey framework that is going to be customized from the one interface intervention to interface intervention, with the ability to be able to switch or to change the process because it's not working for that particular group of leaders, you know?
Yeah.
It's
that balance that Crispin was talking about earlier around, you know, making it broad enough, but also specific enough for your audience at the time.
And so a couple of other components that came through is there's a superficial level of programs, and a suggestion that came through from participants, which is, you know, it should be a journey, and if it is a journey, it should be related and integrated. So not the facilitator being the core only denominator, you know, that can influence the success or failure of the program. So blending in coaching and mentoring, blending in thought partnering, blending in a variety of different learning methodologies. So yes, they can be classroom based, but some online based, webinar based, some self-paced learning based, some learning partnering. We've just been experiencing with one program, we've just implemented a process of having learning partnering, and it has worked brilliantly, and it's totally optional, so the leaders can choose to take it up or not take it up, and yet the leaders are taking up all of those offerings because it's okay, this is what we've learned in that environment. Now in my real environment, spend some time with me and help me to contextualize this for the challenges that I'm actually experiencing, and then hold me accountable next time that I've actually gone and practiced some of these tools or behaviors, and then I can evaluate what the impact of that may well be, as you know. So how the program is put together, and then the content, once again, make sure that it is relevant. And if it's in the program and the content doesn't speak to those leaders at the particular point in time, then don't take them through it because it's on the list. You know? I think those were probably, in summary, the most critical things is what is the content that we're doing, and what is the way in which we now can engage leaders that really works for them, so that they can have a truly beneficial learning experience. I think that's the summary of what participants are asking for. When we go on a leadership journey, this is what it should look and feel like.
Thanks, Jeanette. Some really important points. Sorry, Crispin?
I interrupted you.
No, I was just saying some very important points.
I think I like this idea of a blended, and I don't mean blended classroom online. I don't mean blended that way. I mean blended experience.
Yeah.
I recall one person, senior person, saying to us, I'm on this leadership program. I don't do games. Don't do that stuff with me. That same leader, 4 weeks from now, is going to be on a horse farm, working with a horse and using his influence in a way that he's never had to do before. You see that?
Yeah.
So it's this be line experiential and bringing all that together in a real, and Michelle, that talks to your point about, you know, how, what that requires from a facilitator perspective to hold that whole journey in that whole space.
Thanks, Crispin. I suppose that kind of brings it nicely to a point where, if I can ask you to just pull this all together for us, if there was one core message you wanted to sort of leave our audience with tonight, what would it be?
Leaders are critical. Leaders, and it came through in our leaders either infuse life and wisdom into a system, or they detract from it and they extract from a system. And there's a lot of work to be done, Jocelyn. We've got to rethink and refocus and reinvent, if you want to use that word, a lot of our current practices. We've been fortunate to see organizations who are actually doing this, and it's working for them. So it's not new. But to circle back to where we started, the pull together is the conversations we're having in our organizations about this. What conversations is the HR exec having with his or her leadership team about what they need and how they design for that? What conversations are leaders having with their staff who are attending leadership programs? I'm kind of repeating what I said earlier, but I think the one thing that comes out for me is we can sit and have these conversations, but unless we take these conversations into the organizations that are doing this and working with us, unless we can create a space for HR and line and execs to really engage with each other about what do we want, how are we going to do it, what's going to have the greatest impact, and using some of these insights, to your point earlier, to say what's going to be the best approach for us, and knowing it's going to be very different from organization to organization. I'm encouraged. I mean, you look at a lot of the research and it looks doom and gloom. I'm encouraged that there is a future. I'm encouraged that we've got a sense of what this could look like. I'm encouraged that as we build the capability of leaders, we're going to shift the paradigms and the realities in our country, not even going into the rest. And I'm encouraged that where this is pointing to is that it's not gloom and doom. There is a way forward, and we can get there by having these conversations. And I'd like to continue this conversation with individuals in organizations. And to share. Jeanette said something earlier that was really profound. We've messed up. We made mistakes. There was things we got very wrong, but we've learned through that. And I think that's part of another lesson, is that we learn as we go along, and we shape and craft. And if you want, perfect as we go along. We don't have the full recipe yet.
Thank you very much, Crispin. Yeah, I think one word that comes to mind, and it always reminds me of you, but is hope. You know, there is hope. And I think in your comment, or to Jeanette's comment around, you know, experimenting and making mistakes, but adapting and adjusting and tailoring, in a way, is you almost, or you as facilitators, or us as facilitators, demonstrating those behaviors that are so important for leaders. So it's kind of a nice little circle.
Yeah.
Jeanette, do you have any final thoughts or practical tips that you can give our audience tonight? Take home.
My summary of the feedback that we've received out of this is that everyone is crying out for authentic, courageous, vulnerable leadership, just real people who are absolutely real. The world is changing. Nobody is an expert in this new world of ours. And so what worked for us in the past, our rank and our title and our roles and our everything else that made us feel that we deserve to be leaders, it no longer holds true for a whole variety of reasons. And so right now, I would encourage leaders and anyone involved in leadership development programs is focus on leaders being their authentic selves, and then, connecting and relating with people around them without compromising, executing, and delivering on results that are required to be done. But it's very much now about leaders being authentically who they are and the ability to connect and relate to people in order to achieve results, and getting that formula right in programs that you run, but in the way that you shift your leadership culture within your organization, really can result in meaningful contributions within organizations, communities, societies, continents, and even globally.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jeanette. With 3 minutes to go, I am conscious that we will need to end off soon. So maybe let me just wrap it up in saying thank you both very, very much for summarizing those amazing insights. I would really love to do it again and see, any more shifts, see a broader perspective. But it really is some fascinating information that you've taken us through tonight. And I really look forward to, in the spirit of hope, how we can make those changes that are required. We have 2 minutes. Are there any questions from the floor, from the chat box, that we'd like to pick out? It doesn't look like it. Then I suppose thank you for joining us tonight. I have really enjoyed this conversation, and please do keep a lookout. We will be posting a report per se about this research that we have done in a little bit more detail if you are interested in delving deeper into the actual stats. But yeah, please do join us in next month's session. We would love to see you again.